Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Benjamin, and welcome to a quick Godot tutorial video. This video is going to be a collaboration with GDquest. I'm going to put a link to his channel and the video that he's doing. In this video, I'm going to be doing projectile attacks, and in his video, he's going to be doing melee attacks. So let me show you. By the end of this video, you'll have a simple project that looks about like this, and you can move your dragon up and down, and you can press space to fire a projectile from your dragon and hit the enemy dragons. So nothing too fancy, but we're going to focus mainly on the projectile. So let's get started. I've created a new project. I guess I should also mention that I'm currently using Godot 2.1.4 stable. So this is the stable version of Godot. I think GDquest is going to be using 3.0 for his, which is an unstable branch, but it's going to be stable here pretty soon, and so I think he's just kind of planning ahead, learning the new engine. So there will be a few slight differences because of that, but the principles should apply no matter which version you're using. There might be some slight implementation differences. So I've got a new project set up here, and the first thing we need to do is create our fireball. And so we can come into our project here and click on 2D, and let's actually do the project setup. So we'll do that very first, then we'll create the fireball. So come into scene and then project settings. We'll go into display. I'm going to set the width to 320 and the height to 180. So that sets the width and height of our game room, and I guess the view in the room. And now we need to set the window that it's displayed through, and we'll do that through the test width and height. You can just check both of these, and our test width will be 1280 and our test height will be 720. Close. Now this first scene that we're in, you can see we can now zoom in on this just a little bit. This first scene that we're in is going to be our world scene. So I'm going to create a new base node. Just do the very top one right here, node, and we'll name this world. Now we can save this scene. I'm just going to hit Control S in order to save it. And this is the directory we can save it in, and it wants to save it as world.tscn, and that's perfect. So we'll hit save. And once you've done that, you can try and run the game, and you can say we need a main scene defined. So should we select one? Let's select one, and we'll select our world scene. And you can see then it runs the game just fine. There's nothing in the game right now, but it does run it. Okay. And it doesn't know for sure that this is a 2D scene yet, so it's kind of freaking out a little bit, but we'll let it know here soon. So let's create a new scene. So we'll create new scene. Now this will be our fireball scene. And this scene will be made up of a few nodes. So our fireball needs to be able to detect collisions, okay? And it doesn't actually need to have anything super fancy with its collisions. So we can use an area 2D for our collisions. An area 2D is basically just like an area that can detect whether or not it's colliding with another area or with a body, but it doesn't have any physics associated with it. It won't need to bounce, it won't need gravity really, it's not going to need anything in physics. So we're going to start with our area 2D. So let's come in here, and I'm just going to search it, area 2D, there it is. And we can just rename this fireball. Now our area does need a defined collision shape because this area doesn't have a defined collision shape, so it won't know whether or not it is colliding with something. So if we add a new node to this, we can name we can search for body, or let's see, collision. Collision shape 2D is what we'll want, this very bottom one. So I'm going to double click on that. And we need to give this collision shape node an actual shape. So right here, in the right hand corner here, you can see a shape. It's null. We're just going to click on that and do new circle shape 2D. And it creates a circle shape for us. And we're going to, if you press this little teeny arrow over here going to the right, we can get the properties of this circle shape. And we need to define its radius. It's currently a radius of 10. We'll set it to a radius of 8. And I just found that that's a better radius. And we can press Control S to save this scene, and we'll save it as fireball.tscn. Okay. Now I have some resources for this project, so I'm going to copy those into the project folder. So I'm going to come to my window, my Explorer here, come to Desktop, and I'll click on Fireball Tutorial Resources. I've got the dragon, the fire particle, and the red dragon. I'll just do Control C to copy these. Come into my documents, Godot, tutorials, fireball, and just paste these inside of here. Okay. Once I've done that, they should appear over here inside of my file system. I've got the dragon, the fire particle, and the red dragon. So click on your area 2D up here on the fireball. We're going to add a particle, particles 2D here. So we're going to add a new node and just search particle. If I can type it, there we go. We'll attach a particle 2D, and you can see that automatically creates a particle, and it's creating some particles. We're going to change some information here about the particle. The very first thing we want to do is set up its, and this is all the information about our particles right over here. We want to set its texture very first because we don't want to just use a white pixel. So we'll click on the fireball, or the fire particle right here. Click and drag it, and we can just drop it right into our texture. Boom, right there. And you can see we've got the fireball texture. Now if we press this little over arrow on the texture, we can get the properties of the texture. We want to turn off filtering, and we want to turn off mipmaps because we don't need either of those flags. Now you can see it's pixelated. And sometimes when you first import it, the turning off filtering doesn't quite work. I'm not 100% sure why, but if you reload the scene, it will work. So it doesn't really matter because it will show working in game. So I'm just going to leave it for now. Now that we've set the correct texture, we want to set the correct blend mode. So if you scroll all the way down, we're going to have a blend mode under canvas item. And we're going to set this to additive. And it's starting to look a little bit more like fire. Okay, we're going to change some more properties. The first thing we're going to change is where the fireball is created from. And this can be done inside of your half extents. So if we spread these out, like say we put this to 8 and 8, it would create them kind of in a square of 8 around here. So we're just going to do 2 and 2 for now. We don't want to spread them out too much. We're going to leave our amount at 32, but we're going to set our lifetime at 0.2. So that is basically how long the particle lasts, its lifetime. Okay. Scroll down, and we're going to start changing some of the params right here. So for our direction, we'll do 180. And that should create the fireballs so that they go upwards. For our spread, we're also going to do 180. That should make them kind of go in random directions. And it's already starting to look a lot more like a fireball than it was before. For our linear velocity, we'll do 25. This affects basically how fast they move. Our gravity direction will be 180. That will make the gravity pull them upwards. and our gravity strength will be 490. And that will just make it pull upwards quite a bit stronger. And this is already looking like a pretty good fireball. We haven't even done some of the other little finer details. So our initial angle, we can set this to 180. And our initial size, we'll leave that at 1, but we'll set our final size to 0.25. This will make the fire shrink. So you can see as it gets closer to the end of its lifespan, it will shrink. Okay, so we've done all the params. Now we can come into randomness. And randomness, basically, it's a scale. Each of these numbers is a scale from 0 to 1. And it affects how random that thing is. So for example, if we set our initial angle to 1, it will mean the randomness of our initial angle will be 100% random, basically 0 to 360. And you can see now we're getting, that's a much better fire particle in my opinion, because it's completely, the angle of the particle is random. And we're looking really good for a particle now. There's not really a lot that we need to change from this point on. We've got most of the stuff how we want it. Now, these values, they're kind of hard to understand at first, but if you just keep playing around with them, and you can see what it does right away inside the editor. So if you just keep playing around with them, you can kind of get a good idea of how they work. Now, I want to show you something that's not quite working yet. Let's save our scene. Just do Control S to save it. If you grab the fireball, oops, that's moving our particle. So if we want to click on the parent and not accidentally grab the children, you can actually click this little icon right here, which makes sure the children can't be selected. And then we can grab the parent. But you can see if we move it, the fire stays relative, like the particles stay basically relative to the parent right here. And that's not what we want it to be like. So let's set our fireball, click on the fireball, and come down to, let's see, where's the, position, set both of these to 0. So we'll put it back at the 0, 0, right on the axis. Now if we come into our particles, there's a property inside of here that is whether or not they have local space. And we don't want local space, so we'll turn off local space. Now what happens is when we move the particle, or move the fireball, you can see the particles aren't local to the fireball, or to the space anymore. And this is what we want it to look like when we're moving. And that looks really cool. So our fireball is pretty much done as far as the looks go and the setup. We still need to make sure you set the position on your area 2D back to 0 and 0. We still need to actually program it though. So if you click on the fireball right here on our area 2D node and create a new script, it will just create a script called fireball.gd. That should be fine for now. And I like to make sure I name my scripts up here at the top with a comment so that I know what script I'm in if this window's not, if I have this window hidden for any reason. So extends area 2D just means it inherits from the area 2D, which is what we want. And we don't need these comments right here. So the ready call, I should mention here that since most of the people watching this video probably are my existing users or existing subscribers and they all use GameMaker, I'm going to explain some things in kind of a GameMaker-ish, with a GameMaker perspective, because that's where I'm coming from. But the ready function is kind of like the creative event in GameMaker. Basically, that means that once this scene or object in GameMaker is created, it will run this bit of code. So all we're going to do in here is set process equal to true. And what that does is it basically says run the process event or run the process function. And the process function is the equivalent of the step event in GameMaker. In other words, it runs every single frame of the game. So we'll say func_process, and you can see it comes with a delta variable, which is how long it took to process the previous frame. So we're going to create some variables. We'll create one var speed underscore x. We'll set this equal to 1. Var speed underscore y. We'll set this equal to 0. Now we're going to create a vector for our motion. So a vector is basically just a combination of the x speed and the y speed inside of a single variable. So we'll say var motion equals vector2, and that's a very simplified explanation of a vector, but in this context it makes sense. Speed y. So we're basically taking the y speed and the x speed and the y speed, and we're converting them into a vector right here. Then we want to give our fireball a speed too. So we're going to create a constant up here, const, which is just like a variable, but it never changes. Fireball speed. We'll set this equal to 200. And we're going to multiply our vector right here by our fireball speed. So times fireball speed. Okay. Now we need to update our fireball's position because we're not actually updating it. So we'll say set position, set pose for set position, get position plus motion times delta. So this just gets our current position, and it adds the motion that we've just created to our current position, timesing it by delta, because our delta will be different every single frame of the game. And so basically if your computer's running faster or slower, we need to compensate for that. And so we multiply delta by the motion, so that we should compensate for whether or not the person using the computer, if they're using a faster computer or a slower computer, it shouldn't matter because we're multiplying by the delta to compensate for that. This is how we can set up our fireball to move. And if we actually run, there's two ways to run the game. You can actually press this right here and it'll run the current scene. So if we run that, we should see the fireball shoot across the top of the screen, and it does. Clear up there at the very top. Okay. Did my project settings actually work? Let's come into display, width, height, oh, so there's one last thing you need to do in the project settings, which is to set the stretch mode. So we're going to set stretch mode equal to 2D, and that just makes it so that it will stretch the game, the room size up to the window size. Now if we run this again, it should show the fireball quite a bit bigger. Yeah, there we go. That's what we wanted. Okay. Now that we've done that, we've created our fireball. Let's create a new scene for our dragon. So come up to scene, do new scene, and this scene isn't going to need a lot of code really. So we're going to, let's see, click on 2D so we can see the scene. We're going to just use a sprite is really all we need for this scene. So create a new node, search sprite, and you can rename this dragon. And we'll save this scene, and we'll just want to save it as dragon.tscn. Perfect, that's exactly what we want. And we can come over to our sprite's texture, and we'll set it to the dragon. There we go, the dragon.png. And once again, we don't want the flag set on this texture, so click this little teeny arrow right here. Click on flags and remove bitmaps and remove filter. And you can see, like I said, it didn't really remove the filter very well, but this doesn't matter. When we run it in game, it will look fine. Okay, so we've got our dragon set up. Now our dragon is going to need, basically we need a position for creating the fireball from. So I'm going to add a new node. This will be a position 2D. And we can just put this right in the dragon's mouth. And that will be where we create the fireball from. Okay, now let's add a script to our dragon and just name this dragon.gd. That's fine. I'm going to put a comment up here, dragon.gd. And you can see this script extends sprite or inherits from sprite and has a ready function as well. Now we're going to need to create some constants here. So let's create one, const fireball scene. This allows us to get access to the fireball scene, which in GameMaker terms would be like the fireball object. So how do we get it? We call preload fireball.tscn. There we go. So we're getting access to that scene. We'll create another constant called speed. This will be the dragon's movement speed, and we'll set this equal to 100. Inside of our ready event right here, or script, we'll just set process equal to true. If you don't set process, the process function won't even run. So you have to turn it on. In GameMaker 3.0, it's on by default and you have to turn it off, but okay. So once we've got the process on, we want to get our y speed. So var speed y. We'll set this equal to 0 starting out. But if we actually put in some input we want to move. So if input dot is action pressed UI up colon speed y equals negative speed. If, that's like saying else if, elif input dot is action pressed UI down speed y equals speed. Okay. Once we've adjusted the speed, we actually need to move. So set position, get position. So we'll get our current position plus vector 2, creating a new vector. For our x, we don't need anything, so we'll just set that to 0. For our y, we'll use speed y. And then we'll multiply this by delta. Delta. So that's the same as you saw before. This just gets our current position, adds our our motion vector to it, and then multiplies the motion vector by delta to make sure that we move smoothly, no matter how fast the frame rate is. Okay, let's save this. And we can press this button right up here to run this specific scene. Dragon will be up in the top left corner, but we should be able to move up and down. We're looking good. Okay, now I'm going to show you how to instance the dragon scene inside of the world. Basically, we're going to put the dragon inside of the world. This is like, in GameMaker terms, this would be like adding your object to your room, is basically what it is. So we've got our world. Instead of pressing the plus button right here, press the little chain link button right here. That's what it looks like anyways. I'm not sure exactly what it's supposed to be. But that is for instancing scenes. And you can see we can choose one of our scenes. So we'll choose the dragon scene. And that puts it inside of this world. And then we want to move it now, so we'll move it down. It's important to remember that you don't want to move it inside of its own scene. See how we have it at the origin right here inside of the dragon scene? We don't want to move it anywhere inside of here. We want it to stay at the origin. However, when we instance it inside of our world, we can put it wherever we want. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So I'm going to put the dragon right here. Now if we run our game, we'll have the dragon inside the world. We can move up and down. And we've got a really good start to this. So how can we create some fireballs? Let's come into our dragon script. So if we come back into scripts, click up here. and come into the dragon script, we're going to use another input check inside of our process function. So we'll say if input dot is action pressed UI accept, that's pretty much space. And you can set these input actions inside of the project settings. If you go to input map, you can see where all these are set. You can add new ones, you can delete old ones. But yeah, you can see UI accept is set to return, enter, space, or on an Xbox controller A, possibly. Yeah, it's looking like okay. So for UI accept, we can then create a fireball. So we'll say var fireball equals fireball scene dot instance. Okay. Now, this is a perfect time to talk about this because we just barely inside of our world scene instanced using this button the dragon scene inside of the world scene, right? Press this button, chose the dragon scene, it put it inside of our world. Well, when you have a scene like this that you've loaded in and you call the dot instance, it pretty much does the exact same thing. It instances that scene and then assigns it to this variable. Now, there's one more step to it that this button does automatically, which is it adds the dragon scene as a child of the world scene, of the world node right here. You can see that. We have to do that ourselves in code. So we want to add this fireball as a child of the world scene. Since our dragon is a child of the world, we can do get parent in order to get access to the world node right here. And then just do dot add child fireball. So we do have to do that one more step ourselves inside of code. This button does it automatically for us because it just automatically added the dragon scene as a child to the world node. We have to do it in code. So this gets the world node right here using get parent. And then it adds the child, it adds the fireball as a child of it. Okay. Now we want to set our fireball's position because if we just instance it like that, it will start up in the top left-hand corner. And let me just show you that because it's best to show you instead of just telling you. So I'm going to run the game and you'll see when I press the space key, it creates a fireball. Creates a lot of them if you hold it actually, but it's up in the top left-hand corner of the room. Okay. And actually, real quick, if we do that and then pause the game right here, if you pause it fast enough, you can come into your remote inspector and you can see we have the world node right here. Then we have a dragon, and then we have a bunch of fireball nodes because we created a whole bunch. And you can see they're all children of the world node. Okay. So let's make sure we set the fireball's position. So we'll say fireball dot set position. Now the position we want to set it to, we're inside this is the dragon script, right? If you remember, our dragon has a position 2D right on its mouth. So we can get this position 2D inside of our dragon script. So come back to the script and we'll say get node position 2D. And the reason we can get this node is because it's a child of our dragon. So that's why we can get it. Then we'll say dot get global position. Now we can't get the child's, children are always relative to their parent. So if you look at the dragon, you can see that the position of, or the position 2D has a position of only like 15 and -4. That's because it's relative to the parent's position, which is 0, 0. But if we get the global position right here, that will get its position globally in the game, and that's what we want. in order to get it to set it at the right spot. I'm going to show you what happens if we just do get position, because it won't work how you expect it to. Get position it's creating it from the position of the position 2D, but it's relative to where it is in the parent, which is only like we said, what was it, like 14 and -4 or something, 16, -4. So that's where it's creating it, is 16, -4, like clear up here. Terrible position. But if we get the global position, then it's going to create it relative to the entire game globally. And you can see we can now, oh, that's a lot of fire. It's going to slow down the game. It's a lot of fun though. Okay. So one thing that we can do here, because let's create a bunch of fire, right? Well, let's just create one. Doom. That's probably more than one. But it probably only created a few, right? Went off the screen. But if we pause our game, if it'll let me pause the game. Right? Pause. Debugger, maybe. Remote inspector. So we accidentally created 2 fireballs. But you can see the fireballs still exist, and they'll exist for forever. And that's going to be terrible, right? It's going to slow our game down. So we need the fireballs to destroy once they go outside the room. And we're going to learn about what's called a visibility notifier, which is a node. So click on your fireball right here when you're in your fireball scene. Add a node, search visibility notifier. And we'll just use this one, visibility notifier. Oops, that's the 3D one. We don't want that one. Okay. So visibility notifier 2D, that's the one we want. And you can see it has a little shape to it in case to tell you when it's visible, pretty much. So this visibility Godot has something called, they're called signals, and basically a signal is it's kind of like an event where it just says this thing happened, and you can do something whenever that happens. And I'm going to show you how to connect a signal inside of the UI. So our visibility notifier has, if we click on the visibility notifier, and then instead of on inspector, we click on node, there's a signals button right here. And we have a signal called exit screen. And we want to use this signal. So double click on the signal, and we'll open up a new little window here. And what it's going to do is it's going to attach the signal, or basically it's going to make our fireball subscribe to this signal. So whenever the signal fires, it will run this function inside of our fireball script. And you can see we have make function turned on because we want it to, and we are clicked on the fireball node because it has a script. So when we connect it, what it's going to do is it's going to create a function for us inside of our fireball script, and this function right here will run when the visibility notifier detects that we've exited the screen. Basically when it sends its exit screen signal. And you can see now that it's connected right here. It shows this little green connection. And inside of here we've got our function. So if we just do print left the screen, and then we run the game again, every time a fireball leaves the screen, it's going to print down here and say, oh, I left the screen, right? So now what we want it to do is destroy the fireball. So we can just call Q free. What this does is, there's 2 functions for this. There's free and there's Q free. Q free says destroy myself as soon as possible without ruining other things that are happening in the code. So if you have other code and stuff that might run potentially after, Q free can help prevent errors that way. So generally you're just going to use Q free by default. Now we should never be able to have too many fireballs in the game, because even if we create a whole bunch of them, once they leave the room, if we come into our debugger, we can easily see that inside of our world node there's no fireballs. We've destroyed them all. Now that we've got our fireball set up to destroy itself, we're going to use signals again, except on our dragon, so that we can't fire infinite fireballs like that. So we're going to add a new node, and we're going to add a timer node. And this node is going to have a signal as well. So we're going to come into node right here, and it's timeout, which basically just means when the timer has ended. We'll connect that to our dragon and have it make a function for us. And if we come in here in our dragon's code, we can just set the timer active equal to true. So first we need to get a reference to our timer. So up here at the top, we can get a reference to the timer. We can say onReady var timer equals get node timer. Okay, now it should get the node right here. The reason we have to do onReady var is because this keyword right here makes it so that Godot waits to get this variable until everything is ready. And that just makes sure that the timer node is already there. It already exists. So we have to do that. But once we've got our timer, then inside of our timeout, we can just say timer dot set active, and we'll say false. So we're going to turn our timer off when it finishes. Now we need to use this timer, and I'm going to create two functions. And these are just functions that we can call inside of our process event. So we'll call one func create fireball. And we can move all of our fireball code into this one right here. So copy that, paste it in here. Make sure you've got the tabbing correctly. Godot is very tab heavy, so you're going to get errors if you don't tab things correctly. Then inside of here we can call create fireball like that. So we just made a function for all this so that it makes this more readable right here. We know what this does now very easily. And we can create another function. We'll call this one restart timer. And inside of here we'll just say timer.set wait time 0.5, which is half a second. Timer.set active equals true, so we'll set it to active, and timer dot start. Oh, we don't have to do anything there. So this sets the timer's wait time to half a second, it sets it to active, and then it starts it. Once we've done all of this, we can check inside of our action pressed right here. We can say if not timer dot is active, so if our timer isn't already active, then we create a fireball and restart the timer. So restarting the timer will set our timer to active, so we'll no longer be able to create the fireball because we'll have to wait until the timer times out and then sets active to false again in order to create the fireball. Now we should only be able to create a fireball, and we're not getting anything happening right now. So I need to make sure that I've got this set up correctly. Got a bug somewhere. Timer.start. Let's make sure, let's check inside of our dragon scene. We'll just run the dragon scene. And then we'll pause the game. And we'll check our remote inspector. We do have the timer there, so that's good. Let's check and see. Oh, I know what's wrong. We never actually set the timer. Because see, this sets the timer active to false, but the timer by default is not active. So we need to set it to active inside of our ready function, or our create event, you could say. So we'll say timer.setActive false. So we'll make sure that it's not active. That way we can fire it the first time and then have it obviously then set itself to false every time after. There you go. Now we can only fire a fireball every half second because of our timer. Finally, we're going to create our enemies and deal with the collisions. So we'll create a new scene, and for our enemies we're going to use for the red dragons we're going to use an area 2D again, and you can see over here on the recent we can just double click area 2D, name it red dragon. We're going to give the red dragon a sprite, and we can drag over our red dragon.png and press the little arrow key over again, this one right here, turn off filter and bitmaps, save this scene as reddragon.tscn, just with Control S. We're going to add another node to this. We need a collision shape. Instead of using a collision shape 2D for this, I'm going to use a collision shape polygon just to show you guys how those work. Collision shape. Obviously, it's very game dependent which one you're going to need. Polygons are going to take a slightly more processing power, but you can get them to be more accurate. So once we've created the polygon right here, in a collision shape polygon, you have this nice little edit button right here that we can click. And this will allow us to basically click to draw where we want our collisions to be. Like this. You can determine how accurate you want this to be. The more points, the more processing power, but you know. Then just click on this one to link it up, and we've got a nice collision polygon 2D. If you want to, you can drag this up above the sprite so that it draws behind the sprite, so that it's not in the way. Or you can also just hide it like this. Okay, so we've created our red dragon, but now we need our fireball to be able to detect a collision with the red dragon. So we're going to close out of this scene, close out of the dragon scene. Once we're in the fireball scene, you can click on the area 2D and click on node, and you can see area 2D has some different signals here. And the signal we're going to use is area enter, because this signal will fire as true when we enter another area. So we set up our red dragon as an area, so we can double click on this area enter signal, and we'll connect it to ourselves, and we'll create a function, connect. So now we've got a function for when we enter another area, and all we're going to do is we're going to call queueFree to destroy ourselves, and then area.queueFree to destroy the red dragon or whatever we're colliding with. And we need to instance some of them inside of our world. So come back to the world, click 2D. I'm going to instance a red dragon scene right here. And if you want to shortcut, you can just do click on the node and do Control D to duplicate it, and then click and move it. So now I can create a few red dragons inside of this world. That might be a bit much, but oh well. And run the game. And now you have a working projectile. That's all for this video tutorial. Thank you guys so much for watching it. Be sure to check out GDquest's channel. Hopefully you learned something new about Godot. I am still going to be doing Game Maker Sudo videos, so don't worry about that. I want to do some videos on Godot as well. I've been using it recently, having a lot of fun with it, and I want to do more tutorial content on it as well. You guys can kind of test both engines, find out which one works better for your tastes or your specific game, because they have pluses and minuses for different games as well. I know a lot of you have been asking me to do like a video comparison. I'm hesitant to do it because I don't feel like I know Godot that well yet. So we'll see. Eventually I may do one. You guys will convince me. But anyways, thanks again for watching. Please like the video and subscribe if you enjoyed it, and I will talk to you guys later.